Okay, today is 27th of July 2010. Now we continue the Majjhima Nikāya. Come to Sutta number 22, Alagaddupama Sutta, the simile of the snake. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, another Pitdika spa. Now on that occasion a pernicious view had arisen in a monk named Arita, formerly of the vulture killers. Thus, as I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, those things called obstructions by the Blessed One are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. Several monks, having heard about this, went to the monk Arita and asked him, Friend Arita, is it true that such a pernicious view has arisen in you? Exactly so, friends. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, those things called obstructions by the Blessed One are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. Then these monks, desiring to detach him from that pernicious view, pressed and questioned and cross-questioned him thus, Friend Arita, do not say so. Do not misrepresent the Blessed One. It is not good to misrepresent the Blessed One. The Blessed One would not speak thus, for in many discourses the Blessed One has stated how obstructive things are obstructions, and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. The Blessed One has stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. With the simile of the skeleton, with the simile of the piece of meat, with the simile of the grass torch, with the simile of the pit of coals, with the simile of the dream, with the simile of the borrowed goods, with the simile of the tree laden with fruit, with the simile of the slaughterhouse, with the simile of the sword stake, with the simile of the snake's head. The Blessed One has stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. Yet although pressed and questioned and cross-questioned by them in this way, the monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, still obstinately adhered to that pernicious view and continued to insist upon it. Stop here for a moment. So this monk Arita is saying that obstructions are not really obstructions. So these obstructions, you see here when the monks start to question him and all that, they talk about sensual pleasures. So obstructions here refers to sensual pleasures. Because during the Buddha's time, there were many ascetics who were naked. Monk ascetics as well as non-ascetics. And so sometimes seeing naked bodies, they were stirred and then they engaged in these sensual pleasures. The Buddha says that is wrong. And this simile of the skeleton, piece of meat, etc. actually a more detailed description is given in the Majjhima Nikāya, Sutta 54, Potalya Sutta. So later we will come to that. Okay, to continue. Since the monks were unable to detach him from that pernicious view, they went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, they sat down at one side and told him all that had occurred, adding, Venerable Sir, since we could not detach the monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, from this pernicious view, we have reported this matter to the Blessed One. Then the Blessed One addressed a certain monk thus, Come, monk, tell the monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, in my name that the teacher calls him. Yes, Venerable Sir, he replied. And he went to the monk Arita and told him, The teacher calls you, friend Arita. Yes, friend, he replied. And he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat down at one side. The Blessed One then asked him, Arita, is it true that the following pernicious view has arisen in you? As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, those things called obstructions by the Blessed One are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. Exactly so, Venerable Sir. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, those things called obstructions by the Blessed One are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. And the Buddha said, misguided man, to whom have you ever known me to teach the Dhamma in that way? Misguided man, in many discourses have I not stated how obstructive things are obstructions, and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. I have stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. With the simile of the skeleton, with the simile of the piece of meat, with the simile of the grass torch, with the simile of the pit of coals, with the simile of the dream, with the simile of the borrowed goods, with the simile of the tree laden with fruit, with the simile of the slaughterhouse, with the simile of the sword's stake, with the simile of the snake's head. I have stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. But you, misguided man, have misrepresented us by your wrong grasp, and injured yourself and stored up much demerit. For this will lead to your harm and suffering for a long time. Stop here for a moment. So this silly fellow, even in front of the Buddha, he says, what the Buddha calls obstructions are not obstructions. And then the Buddha continued. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, monks, what do you think? Has this monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, kindled even a spark of wisdom in this Dhamma Vinaya? How could he, Venerable Sir? No, Venerable Sir. When this was said, the monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, sat silent, dismayed, with shoulders drooping and head down, glum, and without response. Then, knowing this, the Blessed One told him, misguided man, you will be recognized by your own pernicious view. I shall question the monks on this matter. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, monks, do you understand the Dhamma taught by me as this monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, does when he misrepresents us by his wrong grasp and injures himself and stores up much demerit? No, Venerable Sir, for in many discourses the Blessed One has stated how obstructive things are obstructions, and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. The Blessed One has stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them, with the simile of the skeleton, with the simile of the snake's head, etc. The Blessed One has stated how great is the danger in them. Good monks, it is good that you understand the Dhamma taught by me thus, for in many discourses I have stated how obstructive things are obstructions, and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. I have stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them, with the simile of the skeleton, with the simile of the snake's head, etc. I have stated how great is the danger in them. But this monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, misrepresents us by his wrong grasp, and injures himself and stores up much demerit. For this will lead to this misguided man's harm and suffering for a long time. Monks, that one can engage in sensual pleasures without sensual desires, without perceptions of sensual desire, without thoughts of sensual desire, that is impossible. I'll stop here for a moment. So this last part is very important. Buddha is saying that one can engage in sensual pleasures without sensual desires, without perceptions of sensual desire, without thoughts of sensual desire. That is impossible. In some other sutta, I think Majjhima Nikāya 43, the Buddha says that when we enjoy sensual pleasures, there is this tendency to crave for it. So it is impossible to engage in sensual pleasures without the desire arising. And this contradicts some of the later books, for example, in the Secret School, the later part of Buddhism. They taught about this Tantric Buddhism, Tantric Buddhism comes from Tantra Yoga, where they say that the people on the spiritual path can engage in sex and all this thing, and it can even help you to attain enlightenment. It's completely rubbish. And even like the Mahayana Sutras, like this Vimalakirti Sutra, where it says the Bodhisattva Manjushri can be like a lay person, do all the enjoy all the worldly pleasures, and still have great attainment and great wisdom. This contradicts, for example, the Magandhya Sutta, where the Buddha says that you cannot find a king or a king's minister enjoying sensual pleasures and yet able to practice the spiritual path like a renunciant and attain the jhanas and the paths and fruits and all that are in stages. So why this is so? Because if you look into the 12 links of dependent origination, you will find that craving and attachment brings about the ego. When you have craving and attachment, the I am arises, the ego arises, I am enjoying. So the spiritual path is to eliminate our ego. So to eliminate the ego, you have to eliminate the craving, the desire. So it is impossible to engage in sensual pleasures without sensual desires, directly contradicting this later Buddhist teaching in the this secret school, esoteric Buddhism. Here, monks, some misguided men learn the Dhamma, discourses, stanzas, expositions, verses, exclamations, sayings, birth stories, marvels, and answers to questions. But having learned the Dhamma, they do not examine the meaning of those teachings with wisdom. Not examining the meaning of those teachings with wisdom, they do not gain a reflective acceptance of them. Instead, they learn the Dhamma only for the sake of criticizing others and for winning in debates, and they do not experience the good for the sake of which they learn the Dhamma. Those teachings, being wrongly grasped by them, conduce to their harm and suffering for a long time. Suppose a man needing a snake, seeking a snake, wandering in search of a snake, saw a large snake and grasped its coils or its tail. He would turn back on him and bite his hand or his arm or one of his limbs. And because of that, he would come to death or deadly suffering. Why is that? Because of his wrong grasp of the snake. So too, here some misguided men learn the Dhamma. And those teachings, being wrongly grasped by them, conduce to the harm and suffering for a long time. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, these misguided men, they learn the Dhamma, but they do not examine the meaning of the teachings with wisdom. And not examining the meaning of the teachings with wisdom, they do not gain a reflective acceptance of them. They only learn for debating, for criticizing others. Even nowadays, we find some of our so-called Buddhist devotees are like that. Criticize others, but they themselves don't keep the precepts and all that. So, you see here, something interesting. The Buddha says that if you examine the meaning of the teachings with wisdom, then you can gain a reflective acceptance of them. This examining the meaning of the suttas and gaining a reflective acceptance means understanding the Dhamma. And understanding the Dhamma, you get right view. And when you get right view, you have entered the stream, the first path. So just by a reflective acceptance of the Buddha's teachings, you get right view and enter the stream. But then after you enter the stream, you still have to work. You have to study some more Dhamma and keep the Sila and slowly, when you understand on a deeper level, then the three fetters fall away and you become a Sotapanna. So this first part is just understanding the Dhamma and gaining a reflective acceptance of them. Here monks, some clansmen learn the Dhamma, discourses, stanzas, expositions, etc. And having learned the Dhamma, they examine the meaning of those teachings with wisdom. Examining the meaning of those teachings with wisdom, they gain a reflective acceptance of them. They do not learn the Dhamma for the sake of criticizing others and for winning in debates. And they experience the good for the sake of which they learn the Dhamma. Those teachings, being rightly grasped by them, conduce to their welfare and happiness for a long time. Suppose a man needing a snake, seeking a snake, wandering in search of a snake, saw a large snake and caught it rightly with a cleft stick, and having done so, grasped it rightly by the neck. Then although the snake might wrap its claws round his hand, or his arm, or his limbs, still he would not come to death or deadly suffering because of that. Why is that? Because of his right grasp of the snake. So too, here some clansmen learn the Dhamma, and those teachings, being rightly grasped by them, conduce to their welfare and happiness for a long time. Therefore, monks, when you understand the meaning of my statements, remember it accordingly. And when you do not understand the meaning of my statements, then ask either me about it or those monks who are wise. Stop here for a moment. So here, a wise person will learn the Dhamma to understand the meaning of the Dhamma. Then when you can understand it, you accept it. That is learning the Dhamma for the right purpose. Also the Buddha says here, when you understand the meaning of the suttas, the Buddha statements are in the discourses, the suttas of the Buddha. And the Buddha says, remember it accordingly to what he says. But if you do not remember, if you don't understand, then we should ask somebody who understands. That's why when we study the Dhamma, two things are important: Dhamma Savana and Dhamma Sakacca. Dhamma Savana is hearing the Dhamma. Dhamma Sakacca is discussion of the Dhamma. Discussion with Dhamma friends who understand the Dhamma, and then whatever questions you have can be answered. Monks, I shall show you how the Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. Listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, the monks replied. The Blessed One said this: Monks, suppose a man in the course of a journey saw a great expanse of water, whose near shore was dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore was safe and free from fear. But there was no ferry boat or bridge going to the far shore. Then he thought, there is this great expanse of water, whose near shore is dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore is safe and free from fear. But there is no ferry boat or bridge going to the far shore. Suppose I collect grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, and bind them together into a raft, and supported by the raft, and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. And then the man collected grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, and bound them together into a raft, and supported by the raft, and making an effort with his hands and feet, he got safely to the far shore. Then when he had got across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus: this raft has been very helpful to me, since supported by it, and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to hoist it on my head, or load it on my shoulder, and then go wherever I want. Now monks, what do you think? By doing so, would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? No, Venerable Sir. By doing what would that man be doing? What should be done with that raft? Here, monks, where that man had got across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus: this raft has been very helpful to me, since supported by it and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to haul it onto the dry land and set it adrift in the water, and then go wherever I want. Now monks, it is by so doing that that man would be doing what should be done with that raft. So I have shown you how the Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. Monks, when you know the Dhamma to be similar to a raft, you should abandon even good states. How much more so bad states? Let's stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that the Dhamma is for the purpose of crossing over to the other shore. The other shore is Nibbana. This shore, which is dangerous and fearful, is samsara, the round of rebirths. So the Buddha is saying that that is the only purpose of the Dhamma, to bring us across to Nibbana. And then lastly, the Buddha says that the Dhamma is similar to a raft, and we should abandon even good states. How much more so bad states? Bad states are of course evil karma, doing evil to the body, speech and mind. Good states maybe like doing charity and all that. If a person is practicing the spiritual path, then it's not important to do charity and other good deeds. The point is to get to the other shore and eliminate the ego, the self. And also it can mean that abandon attachment to good states. Even good states, we should not attach to it. Just like the raft is something useful, but after it has helped you to go across to the other shore, you don't carry it on your head and go around. You just leave it down. So in the same way, when we practice the spiritual path, we do certain practices to get us across. For example, even like ascetic practices and all that. But after it has helped us, then the Buddha says, don't attach to it, don't put it on your head. According to the commentary, says that what the Buddha means is not even to attach to samatha vipassana, serenity and insight. And they quote not attaching to serenity, is not attaching to the jhanas. They quote the Sutta Majjhima Nikāya 66. And not attaching to insight. They quote Majjhima Nikāya Sutta 38. Now the Buddha continues. Monks, there are these 6 standpoints for views. What are the 6? Here, monks, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form or body thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards feeling thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards perceptions thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards volition thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards what is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, encountered, sought, mentally pondered thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. And this standpoint for views, namely, this is self, this the world, after death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change. I shall endure as long as eternity. This too he regards thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. Monks, a well-taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form thus, this is not mine, this is not, this I am not, this is not myself. Regards feeling, perception, volition, consciousness. Consciousness here refers to the seen, heard, sensed, cognized, encountered, sought, mentally pondered. As this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And this standpoint for views, namely, this is self, this is the world. After death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change. I shall endure as long as eternity. This too he regards thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Since he regards them thus, he is not agitated about what is non-existent. Stop here for a moment now. So here the Buddha is talking about 6 standpoints for views. The first five are the five aggregates, body, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. And the sixth one is views. If you attach to these six things, as this is mine, this I am, this is myself, then you will have views. But a noble disciple sees them rightly, and he is not agitated about what is non-existent, because the five aggregates is not the self, no self. So that's why it says it's non-existent. When this was said, a certain monk asked the Blessed One, "Venerable Sir, can there be agitation about what is non-existent externally?" "There can be, monk," the Blessed One said. "Here, monk, someone thinks thus, alas, I had it, alas, I have it no longer, alas, may I have it, alas, I do not get it. Then he sorrows, grieves, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes distraught. That is how there is agitation about what is non-existent externally." "Venerable Sir, can there be no agitation about what is non-existent externally?" "There can be, monk," the Blessed One said. "Here, monk, someone does not think, alas, I had it, alas, I have it no longer, alas, may I have it, alas, I do not get it. Then he does not sorrow, grieve, and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast, and become distraught. That is how there is no agitation about what is non-existent externally." "Venerable Sir, can there be agitation about what is non-existent internally?" "There can be, monk," the Blessed One said. "Here, monk, someone has the view, this is self, this is the world. After death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change. I shall endure as long as eternity. He hears the Tathagata, or a disciple of the Tathagata, teaching the Dhamma, for the elimination of all standpoints, decisions, obsessions, adherences, and underlying tendencies, for the stilling of all his formations, sankhara, for the relinquishing of all attachments, for the destruction of craving, for dispassion, for cessation, for nibbana. He thinks thus, so I shall be annihilated, so I shall perish, so I shall be no more. Then he sorrows, grieves, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes distraught. That is how there is agitation about what is non-existent internally." "Venerable Sir, can there be no agitation about what is non-existent internally?" "There can be, monk," the Blessed One said. "Here, monk, someone does not have the view, this is self, this is mine, this I am, and all that. I shall endure as long as eternity. He hears the Tathagata, or a disciple of the Tathagata, teaching the Dhamma for the elimination of all standpoints, decisions, obsessions, adherences, and underlying tendencies, for the stilling of all formations, for the relinquishing of all attachments, for the destruction of craving, for dispassion, for cessation, for nibbana. He does not think thus, so I shall be annihilated, so I shall perish, so I shall be no more. Then he does not sorrow, grieve, and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast, and become distraught. That is how there is no agitation about what is non-existent internally." I stop here for a moment. So here externally refers to things of the world, for example, property. So somebody, if he loses his property, then he says, alas, I had it, alas, I have it no longer. So he gets agitated. And if he's not attached to it, then he's not agitated. And internally refers to the self. If a person does not understand the Dhamma, then he comes to listen to the Dhamma, and then he hears the Buddha says there is no self. Then he becomes confused. He thinks, formerly I had a self, now I have no self. Then he has lost his self. So he becomes agitated. But if a person understands the Dhamma, then when the Buddha says there is no self, he does not become agitated. Monks, you may well acquire that possession that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and that might endure as long as eternity. But do you see any such possession, monks? No, Venerable Sir. Good monks, I too do not see any possession that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and that might endure as long as eternity. Monks, You may well cling to that doctrine of self that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who clings to it. But do you see any such doctrine of self, monks? No, Venerable Sir. Good monks, I too do not see any doctrine of self that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who clings to it. Monks, you may well take as a support that view that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who takes it as a support. But do you see any such support of views, monks? No, Venerable Sir. Good monks, I too do not see any support of views that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who takes it as a support. Monks, there being a self, would there be what belongs to myself? Yes, Venerable Sir. Or there being what belongs to a self, would there be myself? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, since a self and what belongs to a self are not apprehended as true and established, then this standpoint for views, namely, this is self, this the world, after death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, I shall endure as long as eternity. Would it not be an utterly and completely foolish teaching? What else could it be, Venerable Sir? It would be an utterly and completely foolish teaching. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that if there was something, some possession that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, then you should acquire it. But the Buddha asked the monk, can you find any such possession? And they said no, because everything in the world is impermanent. It cannot be unchanging, eternal. Also the Buddha says, if there is a doctrine of self, of the ego, that would not cause sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, then you can cling to it. But is there any such doctrine of self that would not cause suffering? And the monk said no. So the Buddha said, I also cannot find any such doctrine of self that would not bring us suffering. And then Buddha says, if there is a view that would not arouse suffering, sorrow, lamentation, etc., then you can take it as a support. But there is no such view. If you held on to it, that would not give you suffering. So the Buddha says that since there is no self, any teaching that talks about the self is utterly and completely foolish teaching. Monks, what do you think? Is material form or body permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Monks, what do you think? Is feeling, perception, volition, consciousness permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, monks, any kind of material form, whatever, any kind of feeling, perception, volition, consciousness, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all of these aggregates, these five aggregates, should be seen as they actually are with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Seeing thus, monks, a well-taught, noble disciple becomes disenchanted with body, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. Being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge, it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that the five aggregates which we take to be the self, or as belonging to the self, or in the self, or the self in the five aggregates. These five aggregates basically is body and mind. And also we consider as five things, it is body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. So because it is impermanent and suffering, it is not fit to regard it as I and mine. Because if we regard it as I and mine, when it changes, then you will suffer. So seeing it in this way, a noble disciple becomes wearied or disenchanted, and then after that he becomes dispassionate, and that will bring him to liberation. Monks, this monk is called one whose shaft has been lifted, whose trench has been filled in, whose pillar has been uprooted, one who has no bar, a noble one whose banner is lowered, whose burden is lowered, who is unfettered. And how is the monk one whose shaft has been lifted? Here the monk has abandoned ignorance, has cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, done away with it so that it is no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is one whose shaft has been lifted. And how is the monk one whose trench has been filled? Here the monk has abandoned the round of birds that brings renewed being, has cut it off at the root so that it is no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is one whose trench has been filled in. And how is the monk one whose pillar has been uprooted? Here the monk has abandoned craving, has cut it off at the root so that it is no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is one whose pillar has been uprooted. And how is the monk one who has no bar? Here the monk has abandoned the 5 lower fetters, has cut them off at the root so that they are no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is one who has no bar. And how is the monk a noble one whose banner is lowered, whose burden is lowered, who is unfettered? Here a monk has abandoned the conceit I am, has cut it off at the root so that it is no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is a noble one whose banner is lowered, whose burden is lowered, who is unfettered. Monks, when the gods with Indra, with Brahma and with Prajapati seek a monk who is thus liberated in mind, they do not find anything of which they could say. The consciousness of one thus gone is supported by this. Why is that? One thus gone, I say, is untraceable here and now. So here the Buddha is talking about the Arahant. He is one whose shaft has been lifted, etc. The description has been given by the Buddha, so no need to expand on it. So saying monks, so proclaiming, I have been baselessly, vainly, falsely, and wrongly misrepresented by some recluses and Brahmins thus. The recluse Gautama is one who leads astray. He teaches the annihilation, the destruction, the extermination of an existing being. As I do not proclaim, so have I been baselessly, vainly, falsely, and wrongly misrepresented by some recluses and Brahmins thus. The recluse Gautama is one who leads astray. He teaches the annihilation, the destruction, the extermination of an existing being. Monks, both formerly and now, what I teach is suffering and the cessation of suffering. If others abuse, revile, scold and harass the Tathagata for that, the Tathagata on that account feels no annoyance, bitterness or dejection of the heart. And if others honor, respect, revere and venerate the Tathagata for that, the Tathagata on that account feels no delight, joy or elation of the heart. If others honor, respect, revere and venerate the Tathagata for that, the Tathagata on that account thinks thus. They perform such services as these for the sake of what had earlier come to be fully understood. Therefore, monks, if others abuse, revile, scold and harass you, on that account you should not entertain any annoyance, bitterness or dejection of the heart. And if others honor, respect, revere and venerate you, on that account you should not entertain any delight, joy or elation of the heart. If others honor, respect, revere and venerate you, on that account you should think thus. They perform such services as these for the sake of what had earlier come to be fully understood. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that some recluses and Brahmins have been baselessly, vainly, falsely and wrongly misrepresenting the Buddha, that the Buddha teaches the annihilation of a being. But the Buddha is saying, because the Buddha is teaching that there is no being, so other external ascetics, they teach that there is a being, there is a self. So when the Buddha says there is no self, So they accuse him of destroying this self. But the Buddha's teaching is that basically to start with, there is no self. It's just an illusion. Just like you see the simile of these neon lights. Last time, nowadays, it's not so common. These neon lights, you have a lot of lights, and the lights light up and stop. Another one will light and stop. Another will light and stop. So it seems as though the light is going in a certain direction, right? That's one will light up and stop. Another will light and stop. So you see like a line of light going continuously. Actually, there's no line of light. It's just an illusion. In the same way, our consciousness, we think, is an unending stream of consciousness, but our consciousness is not an unending stream. Our consciousness arises and passes away extremely fast. Buddha says there's nothing faster than the mind. So our consciousness arises and passes away, arises and passes away. It arises actually because of sankhara. If you look at dependent origination, avijja, paccaya, sankhara, sankhara, paccaya, vijnana. Avijja is ignorance. Because of ignorance, there is sankhara. Sankhara is the will to live. And because of the will to live, our consciousness arises. It arises and passes away. And because of the will to live, again it arises and passes away. And because of the will to live, it arises and passes away. So each time it arises, we are alive. But the moment it ceases, we are dead. So we again, because of our consciousness, the will, we make the consciousness arise again. But we cannot sustain it, it will die again. So we are trying to exist, moment to moment, we are using our will, trying to live. Actually, you cannot live. The moment you exist, you will die. The moment you exist, you will die. So, we are making an extreme effort to exist, but actually we don't exist here. We seem to exist. Just like the line of lights. The line of lights is going. You think it is going, but there is no line of lights going. It's just an illusion. So similarly, that's why in the suttas, the Buddha says there is no living being. So other external ascetics, they don't understand. So they say the Buddha is teaching the annihilation of a being. Therefore, lastly, the Buddha says, if others revile us, then we should not be annoyed. And if they honor and respect also, we should not be delighted. We just take it that they have understood the Dhamma, so they provide such services. Therefore, monks, whatever is not yours, abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. What is it that is not yours? Material form or body is not yours. Abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. Similarly, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness is not yours. Abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. Monks, what do you think? If people carried off the grass, sticks, branches and leaves in this Jeta grove, or burned them, or did what they liked with them, would you think people are carrying us off, or burning us, or doing what they like with us? No, Venerable Sir, why not? Because that is neither ourself nor what belongs to ourself. So too, monks, whatever is not yours, abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. What is it that is not yours? The body is not yours. Feeling, perception, volition, consciousness is not yours. Abandon it. When you have abandoned it, it will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that these five aggregates, body, feeling, perception and volition, and body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness, which is basically body and mind, which we take to be the self. The Buddha says it's not the self. Because in some other suttas, the Buddha says we have no control over these five aggregates. They come and they go. So if we cling to it, because these five aggregates are impermanent, if we cling to these five aggregates, and when they change, they will give us suffering. But we tend to identify with these 5 aggregates. That's why we have the identity view, Sakkaya and Ditthi, which is eliminated by an Arya. Monks, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, open, evident and free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, open, evident and free of patchwork, there is no future round for manifestation in the case of those monks who are Arahants, with taints destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached the true goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and are completely liberated through final knowledge. Monks, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, etc., free of patchwork, those monks who have abandoned the 5 lower fetters are all due to reappear spontaneously in the pure abodes, and there attain final Nibbana without ever returning from that world. Monks, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, etc., free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, etc., those monks who have abandoned the 3 lower fetters and attenuated lust, hatred and delusion are all once returners, returning once to this world to make an end of suffering. Similarly, those monks who have abandoned 3 fetters are all stream enterers, who are no longer subject to perdition, bound for deliverance and headed for enlightenment. Similarly, those monks who are Dhamma followers or faith followers are all headed for enlightenment. Similarly, those monks who have sufficient faith in me, sufficient love for me, are all headed for heaven. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. That's the end of the sutta. So this final part, the Buddha says that he's talking about those monks who have attained various Aryan stages. The ones who have attained Arahanthood, the 4th fruit, there is no more rebirth for them. And those who have attained, who have destroyed the 5 lower fetters, the Anagamins, they will take rebirth in the pure abodes without returning from that world. That's why they're called Anagamins, non-returners. Those who have abandoned the 3 lower fetters and attenuated, weakened lust, hatred and delusion, once returners, Sakadagamins, they come back to this human birth one more time to make an end of suffering, enter Nibbana. And those who have abandoned 3 fetters, all stream enterers, Sotapanna, headed for enlightenment, maximum 7 more lifetimes. And then those who are Dhamma followers and faith followers are all first path attainers, also headed for enlightenment. Even the monks who have faith in the Buddha, love for the Buddha, they are all headed for heaven, the Buddha says. So this sutta is quite long, only 50 minutes. So there are so many things in this sutta. Started with the Buddha saying that this silly monk has a wrong view, and saying that sensual pleasures are not obstructions. But the Buddha says definitely you cannot engage in sensual pleasures without sensual desires. And then the Buddha says when we learn the Dhamma, we should grasp it correctly, just like grasping a snake. You grasp the snake wrongly, you get bitten. So in the same way, in the Dhamma, when we learn the Dhamma, we have to learn it for the right purpose. The right purpose is to understand the Dhamma. When we understand the Dhamma, then it will help us to cross over to the other shore, just like the raft. So the Dhamma is like the raft, bringing us to the other shore. Then later the Buddha talks about not to be attached to the 5 aggregates, and not to attach to views, because they give us suffering. So then also the Buddha says, if others praise us or revile us, we should not be moved. Okay, I think we'll try to do one more sutta. Sutta number 23, Vammika Sutta, the ant hill. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Kumara Kassapa was living in the blind man's grove. Then when the night was well advanced, a certain deity of beautiful appearance, who illuminated the whole of the blind man's grove, approached the Venerable Kumara Kassapa and stood at one side. So standing, the deity said to him, Monk, this anthill fumes by night and flames by day. Thus spoke the Brahmana. Delve with the knife, thou wise one. Delving with the knife, the wise one saw a bar. A bar, O Venerable Sir. Thus spoke the Brahmana. Throw out the bar, delve with the knife, thou wise one. Delving with the knife, the wise one saw a toad. A toad, O Venerable Sir. Thus spoke the Brahmana. Throw out the toad, delve with the knife, thou wise one. Delving with the knife, the wise one saw a fork. A fork, O Venerable Sir. Thus spoke the Brahmana. Throw out the fork, delve with the knife, thou wise one. Delving with the knife, the wise one saw a sieve. A sieve, O Venerable Sir. Thus spoke the Brahmana. Throw out the sieve, delve with the knife, thou wise one. Delving with the knife, the wise one saw a tortoise. A tortoise, O Venerable Sir. Thus spoke the Brahmana. Throw out the tortoise, delve with the knife, thou wise one. Delving with the knife, the wise one saw an axe and a block. An axe and block, O Venerable Sir. Thus spoke the Brahmana. Throw out the axe and block, delve with the knife, thou wise one. Delving with the knife, the wise one saw a piece of meat. A piece of meat, O Venerable Sir. Thus spoke the Brahmana. Throw out the piece of meat, delve with the knife, thou wise one. Delving with the knife, the wise one saw a Naga serpent. A Naga serpent, O Venerable Sir. Thus spoke the Brahmana. Leave the Naga serpent. Do not harm the Naga serpent. Honor the Naga serpent. Monk, you should go to the Blessed One and ask him about this riddle. As the Blessed One tells you, so should you remember it. Monk, other than the Tathagata or a disciple of the Tathagata, or one who has learned it from them, I see no one in this world with its gods, Maras and Brahmas, in this generation with its recluses and Brahmins, its princes and its people, whose explanation of this riddle might satisfy the mind. That is what was said by the deity, who thereupon vanished at once. I stop here for a moment. So this monk was living in the blind man's grove in the forest, practicing. And at night, a deva came. He says deity, not sure a deva or a devi, and was very bright. And he spoke this riddle to this monk, saying that this anthill fumes by night and flames by day. And then this Brahmana, this holy man, came and told this wise man. He said, use the knife, delve with the knife, go take the knife and search, poke out, see what you can find. And then the first thing he saw was a bar. This wise man saw a bar, and he said he saw a bar. And then the Brahmana, the holy one, told him, throw away the bar and continue delving again. And then he saw a toad, and then he asked him to throw away the toad and delve again, and he found a knife, etc. So this deity said very few people will be able to answer this riddle. Then when the night was over, the Venerable Kumara Kassapa went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and told the Blessed One what had occurred. Then he asked, Venerable Sir, what is the anthill? What the fuming by night? What the flaming by day? Who is the Brahmana? Who is the wise one? What is the knife? What is the delving? What the bar? What is the toad? What the fork? What the sieve? What the tortoise? What the axe and block? What the piece of meat? What the Naga serpent? And the Buddha said, Monk, the anthill is a symbol for this body, made of material form, consisting of the four great elements, procreated by a mother and father, built up out of boiled rice and porridge, and subject to impermanence, to being worn and rubbed away, to dissolution and disintegration. What one thinks and ponders by night, based upon one's actions during the day, is fuming by night. The actions one undertakes during the day by body, speech and mind, after thinking and pondering by night, is the flaming by day. The Brahmana is a symbol for the Tathagata, Arahant, Sammasambuddha. The wise one is a symbol for a monk in higher training. The knife is a symbol for noble wisdom. The delving is a symbol for the arousing of energy. The bar is a symbol for ignorance. Throw out the bar, abandon ignorance. Delve with the knife, thou wise one. This is the meaning. The toad is a symbol for the despair due to anger. Throw out the toad, abandon despair due to anger. Delve with the knife, thou wise one. This is the meaning. Stop here for a moment. The bar is a symbol for ignorance, because the bar is a big obstruction. So the Brahmana is the Buddha. Buddha says, throw out ignorance, because it's a big obstruction. And then the toad is a symbol for despair due to anger. Toad is an ugly thing. So when we are angry, we are also ugly. That's why the toad is a symbol for despair due to anger. The fork is a symbol for doubt. Throw out the fork. Abandon doubt. Delve with the knife, thou wise one. That is the meaning. The sieve is a symbol for the 5 hindrances, namely the hindrance of sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, and doubt. Stop here for a moment. So the fork is a symbol for doubt. The fork, there are so many, so many ends. You don't know which one to choose. You have doubt. The sieve is symbolizes a fine obstruction. The bar just now was a big obstruction. The sieve is a finer obstruction, because the sieve tends to obstruct the some things from passing through. So that's why it's a symbol for the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are the 5 obstructions. The tortoise is a symbol for the 5 aggregates of attachment, namely the body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness aggregates. So why is the tortoise a symbol for the 5 aggregates? Because the tortoise has got the, when it's walking, 4 limbs come out, plus the head, right? So there are 5 things. The axe and block is a symbol for the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. Forms, sounds, odors, flavors, tangibles that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. Now, according to the commentary, the axe symbolizes sensual desire and the block symbolizes sense objects. So if you say the axe is sensual desire, the block is sense objects, so the axe will chop the block. But sensual desire chopping sense objects does not seem so logical. Maybe it's the other way around. Axe is the sense objects, because the sense objects impinge on us. The forms impinge on our eye. You can say chop our eye. Sounds chop our ears. Smells or odors chop our nose, etc. So the block maybe is the sense basis, our eye, our ear, nose, tongue, body and mind, because the sense objects are always chopping our sense basis. The piece of meat is a symbol for delight and lust. The Naga serpent is a symbol for a monk who has destroyed the stains or asavas. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Kumara Kassapa was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. And that's the end of the sutta. So here this riddle can be said to be a monk because this wise one is a symbol for a monk in higher training. So a monk in higher training is working hard. Is working hard to get rid of all these things that are blocking him, starting with ignorance and then despair due to anger, doubt, 5 hindrances, etc. So the Buddha is advising him to continue working. So here the working is to delve with the knife, keep digging up all the rubbish. So eventually he gets down to the Naga serpent, the enlightened being. So he becomes enlightened. So this just this deity, this Deva or Devi, just testing the monk, see whether the monk understands this riddle or not. So we stop here.
I want to check if something is like the monks at Rab, they are actually towards the direction. It seems that they want to go to Nibbana. So it's like house, Rao rebirth. So probably this is like a craving, like you are like going out of rebirth. So probably we shall be cool, like not to so much craving of how rebirth or Nibbana practices spiritual path.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
There is one sutta where the Buddha says that generally sensual pleasures brings along with it craving, attachment. But the Buddha says not all sensual pleasures come along with craving, because when you attain jhana, it is also a kind of sensual pleasure, but it does not. The Buddha says not all pleasures brings along craving. The normal sensual pleasures brings along comes with craving, but the bliss of jhana, the pleasure of jhana, does not have craving. And on the reverse, the Buddha says grief generally brings with it grief or suffering brings with it aversion. When you have pain or anything, you have aversion for it. But the Buddha says not all grief comes along with aversion. So the Buddha mentions like somebody who desires liberation, so is pining for liberation, grieving for liberation, but that does not bring along aversion. So when we desire this liberation, also we must not be too agitated. If you desire too strongly, then it's like the Buddha in his early days, when the Buddha was striving for enlightenment. The desire to become enlightened was so great that he went to great lengths to practice these ascetic practices, these unbeneficial ascetic practices, which gave him a lot of suffering, which brought no benefit. For example, starving himself, eating only particular types of food, even to the stage of eating only cow shit, cow excrement, and even to the stage of eating his own excrement, the Buddha said. And also eating so little until he was eating 1 grain of rice a day. So he nearly died from that. So that is having excessive desire. That's why in the first sutta of the Samyutta Nikāya, the Buddha said, when he strove, that means he strove too hard, he was whirled around. Because when he strove too hard, he was so agitated, wanting to become enlightened, that he was whirled about. His mind was very agitated. And then when he stood still, did nothing, he sank. So the Buddha said, without striving and without standing still, he crossed the flood. So you do your work to become liberated, but don't get agitated over it. The important thing now when we walk the spiritual path is to be walking on the right path. And the right path, you can only be guided by the Buddha's words. That's why the Buddha said, after he is gone, take the Dhamma and the Vinaya as his teachings. And the Buddha also said, if any monk teaches such and such, claims that such and such is the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha said, don't accept and don't reject. Compare it with the suttas and the Vinaya. If it accords with the suttas and the Vinaya, that is the Buddha's teaching. Otherwise it is not. So the most important thing is to practice the correct path, following the suttas and the Vinaya. And whether the fruit comes or not, don't worry. The Buddha says, when a hen is sitting on the eggs, I keep sitting. If he is doing this work of sitting on the eggs all the time, then the hen does not need to make a wish. Oh, may my eggs hatch. The Buddha says, the eggs will hatch naturally. But if it has not sat long enough on the eggs, then the Buddha says, the hen may make a wish. Oh, may my eggs hatch today, or tomorrow may the eggs hatch. It will not hatch. Why? Because he has not done enough work. The hen has not done enough work. So in the same way, we don't count our eggs. So we just do our work, and then as long as doing your work, the result will come naturally. So the important thing is to walk the right path. The Buddha gave a simile of somebody. He saw some people getting oil by pressing sesame seeds. But probably he saw it from a distance. He's trying to steal their trade secret. So he saw they were doing this to get oil. So he quietly went, and what did he do? He got sand and tried to crush the sand to get oil. Can he get oil? Cannot get it. Because he's doing the wrong thing. So in the same way, the Buddha says, when you make effort, make sure you are making effort in the right direction. Don't make in the wrong direction. As long as you are doing it in the right direction, when the result comes, don't worry. If the result doesn't come, that means you haven't sat on the eggs long enough.
Really Bhante, one question. On Sutra 32, paragraph 15, it says that we have to give out ourselves. If we give out ourselves, we will everlasting permanent nirvana. Sorry, repeat now. Because I was reading on the paragraph, it says that we have to give up ourselves attachment so that we can actually become a true, finding our true character. But then, if let's say we reborn and reborn, then there's not a true self. Then we reach I mean, because in our lifestyle, there are so many attachments. So it's quite difficult for us, normal person, to actually achieve a good standard. So unless we are like Bhante, learn many years, we are not but is there any solution for this?
You see, if we study the suttas, we find the Buddha said, when he looked into the past 91 world cycles, he saw only 6 Sammasambuddhas. Whereas in another sutta, Isigili Sutta, the Buddha mentioned at one time outside Rajagaha, there was this hill, Isigili. At one time it had 500 Pachika Buddhas. So what the Buddha is trying to say is that 99.99% of Buddhas are Pachika Buddhas. Pachika Buddhas are fully enlightened Buddhas who who do not want to teach, do not want to teach the Dhamma to the whole world. So, why is that? Are they selfish? No. They understand that everybody has their own time. As we go along the round of rebirths, we suffer. And when we suffer, we learn lessons. When we learn lessons, slowly we become more and more spiritually mature. So, right now you are a layman. You see me as a monk. Long time ago, I was also a layman. I saw another person as a monk. I was thinking how long it'll be before I become a monk. So, in the future lifetime, one day you will probably also become a monk. And somebody also ask you the same question. So we all have a time when we go on the round of rebirths long enough, then we suffered long enough, and then we become wiser. Then we realize all the pleasures in the world actually are so fleeting. All the things that you think about in the world that you enjoy them only a short while only. And then if you are greedy, you want to enjoy more. When there's too much of it, sometimes you cannot stand, you blow your mind. Or if it doesn't blow your mind also, you get bored by it. Just as last night, 2 nights ago, I gave the simile, listen to music, music very nice. But you play it too long, it becomes boring. Play longer, it becomes a nuisance already. You keep playing all the time, it becomes suffering already. So changes, everything changes. So don't worry, your time will come. But of course, if you want to take express, and this lifetime become a monk, leave your wife at home, come and become a monk. Which number 15? Okay.
So before education should be considered the this is not this I am not. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. So the last one is not myself, not myself. Is the same as a non-self or no self?
Some people say it is not self.
So sometimes in the start they say non-self.
Sometimes they say no self.
They say
in a way, there's no self, meaning there's nothing that is permanent. If there's something that is permanent, unchanging, you can identify that with the self. But if something only exists for extremely short time, for example, just now I mentioned about our consciousness. Our consciousness arises. And when the consciousness arises, you say you're alive. But the next moment, the consciousness ceases, you are dead already. So when the consciousness arises again, it's a different self already, different consciousness. So the second consciousness arises. If you identify yourself with it again you will cease. See, and again another consciousness arises. That's a different self already. But all these you say is me, is I. But it's not you. It's changing all the time. So that's why the Buddha says no self.
It's a wrong way to say there's a permanent self, and also the wrong way to say that there is no self.
No, I didn't say it's wrong way to say there's no self.
So the five states will be arising and ceasing away all the time.
But you see, when sometimes the Buddha talks about the self, in the conventional self, in the conventional sense, when the Buddha says, I teach the Dhamma, but there is no I. Buddha says, I teach them. In the way of speaking, worldly way of speaking, there is a self. But when the Buddha says no self, he says anatta. Anatta means no one thing that is permanent, unchanging, that you can identify yourself with. There's no such thing.
So Bhante, the arising and ceasing of these five aggregates, is there a term to describe it?
I don't understand.
Is there a term that in a sutta to describe the arising and ceasing of these five aggregates?
The Buddha always talks in the suttas about, always says that consciousness is dependently arisen. Because there is one sutta where a monk says it is the same consciousness that travels on the round of rebirths. It's the same consciousness. But the Buddha says that's wrong. The Buddha says consciousness, every consciousness is dependently arisen. Depend on what? For example, the seeing consciousness. For the seeing consciousness to arise, there must be a good eye, and there must be a form coming before the eye. And then, when there is contact, then the consciousness arises, the seeing consciousness arises. So similarly, for hearing consciousness, consciousness does not exist automatically by itself. It must have condition for it to arise. That's why the Buddha says consciousness is not an unending stream of consciousness. That's why you notice in the dependent origination, the way the commentators and Abhidhamma talk about vijnana, they talk about the last consciousness, as though consciousness is an unending stream. And then when consciousness ceases, then only they say the consciousness stops and then arises again. But it's not like that. Every moment to moment, consciousness is arising and passing away, rising and passing away.
One more question. Normally the Chinese believe in this like is it a wrong view or it's pertaining to itself?
No, it's not a wrong view. It's a wrong translation. Because in our English books, this anatta, no self, they translate it as no soul. So because they translate it as no soul, they think there is no linghun. They say there's also the Abhidhamma teaching. The Abhidhamma teaching is that when a being dies here and is reborn there, nothing goes from here to there. That is their understanding of anatta. Their understanding of anatta is that when this being dies here, the consciousness ceases. Nothing travels over to there, but there the consciousness starts. That is not what the Buddha said. The Buddha says that there is this being when he dies here and is reborn as a human being there. This what the Buddha calls a gandhabba. Sometimes it's called intermediate body. This intermediate body will go and enter the womb there. There is something entering the womb. So it's because of their not understanding the nature of consciousness. So they cannot accept that something goes and enters there. Now the teaching of the Buddha is that anatta means that there is nothing permanent. Everything is changing. So this linghun, this soul, is also a bundle of energy. Why cannot you accept this bundle of energy going and being reborn there? Because it's just a bundle of energy only. It's like this being entering the womb. According to those people who remember their past lives, they were reborn as a small being. This small being entered the womb. So if you can accept this big being, this human body is so big compared to the small being that enters the womb. If this small being does not exist, then this body also does not exist. How can we can accept this flesh body to be existing, or a deva so huge can exist? Why can't you accept a small being? This soul to exist. Another thing is that the Buddha says when a person's karma is so bad, then when he dies, he is due to be reborn in hell. Then the hell beings will come up and drag him down to hell. Now drag what? Drag his soul. He cannot drag his body is lying here dead. So the hell beings come up. Ngao Tao Ma Min, Wu Tao Be Bin, come up and drag his soul down to hell. What is this soul? This is a bundle of energy. Of course, this bundle of energy is all within consciousness. It's just a dream only. This being, this so-called being, he dreams that he's being pulled down to hell. This is dream only. Yeah.
Bhante, there are certain the teaching about emptiness. What is comparison to our non-soul?
It's the same thing. Emptiness means empty of a self.
Empty of self.
Empty is the same. Empty of something that is permanent, unchanging.
Yeah.
Sunyata.
Living for monks is desire, no, many people. But because of family attachment and a lot of attachment, it seems like a bit selfish, just live. So what do you think? Because so to left for monkhood has brought a lot of suffering to the people. How to reconcile this?
There are two types of suffering. There are two types of suffering. One is mental suffering, one is physical suffering. When a monk goes forth and he leaves the family, he should take care of their physical needs. For example, a man, he has started a family, he's got some young kids and all that. If he walks out of the house, the wife has to look after the kids, right? So if he does that, he has to make sure that the family is financially well provided for. For example, like the Buddha. The Buddha, when he renounced, his son was just born only. But he walked out of the house. Why? Because according to the suttas, the Buddha said that his father was richer. That's why I built 3 mansions for him for the 3 seasons. So the family was very rich. So when he walked out of the house, he didn't have to worry about money. They were well provided for. The wife and children was well provided for. Of course, it gave them mental suffering. But this mental suffering, to give them mental suffering, is good actually. Why? Because dukkha is a very good teacher. After the Buddha left them, then he practiced and became enlightened. And then he came back, taught them the Dhamma, and helped them to become enlightened. You notice nowadays, because life is good, a lot of young people, they grow up without seeing dukkha. So because they don't see dukkha, they have a particular view of the world. But when they grow up, after they graduate and all this, they go out into the world and work, then they find a lot of dukkha. In the house, as a young man, they had no pressure, no stress. But after they start working, they find so stressful, and the world is so cruel compared to their home. So many people out to cheat them, and all that. So the sooner they learn dukkha, the better. Some of the older people like you and me, in our younger days, we did not have such a good life. I remember when I was young, there were times when the tap had no water. I had to walk out to the street and carry water. Because it's not often. But because of that, also because the family was not rich, we learned to be thrifty. We learned to save money and all these things. So we become better for it. So also, in life, people who learn the Dhamma, you see the people who learn the Dhamma at a young age and people who practice the Dhamma at an old age, sometimes, there are some people refuse to come and learn the Dhamma. And ask them to come and listen to a Dhamma talk, they refuse. Ask them to do charity, they refuse. They say, I don't harm people, why should I take the trouble to go and do charity? Some people have this attitude. So, at the end of life, when they are about to die, then they see the ghost realm, ghost relatives coming to welcome them, and then they panic and then they get scared. Then they realize, last time this Ong used to ask me to go and listen to Dhamma talk and never went to. Then they regret. So that time they learn too late. Right? So in the same way, sometimes a person like myself, when I was young, my parents didn't know Dhamma. So when I told my parents I wanted to renounce, my father's eyes became red. So also I knew it was not ready. So I waited until the time was ready. During that waiting period, my father passed away. And then finally, I renounced. And then, of course, my mother felt a lot of dukkha. But after I renounced and I taught the Dhamma, and I taught her to listen to Dhamma, and I saw she benefited from it. So, it helped her a lot now. So she had more time to listen to Dhamma. So, if, for example, you think if I renounce, I'm going to hurt my father. Yes, you're going to hurt your father, but that is good for him. Because hurting him now is better than when he dies, then he realizes the importance of the Dhamma. At that time, you cannot help him already. But now, like the Buddha, when he left, the family was so hurt. But when he came back and taught them the Dhamma, then they realized all that pain was worth it.
Bhante, you are very lucky when you think that. For us, very people, we have a vow to go to the registrar and there you are fine. So that kind of vow is used against us. Against the vow. So it is not an easy thing to get out of it.
If a man gives this type of excuse, it means his time is not ready yet. When he's ready, you see, like the Buddha's time, many arahants were married, like Mahakassapa, the wife, and others also. So many. Some of them even had 4 wives and very rich family and all that. Anuruddha, Bhaddiya. Bhaddiya was the chief of the Sakyans. Okay, stop here. Getting late now.